Thank you. And it's really an honor to be here. And I know I've said that a couple of times, but I really mean that. I feel very honored to be here and speak about these experiences that I've really never talked about before. I've just kept them in my memories, so it's really important for me to be able to process them in a way by speaking about them as well.
Yes, hi Jackie, and hi everyone. Today is April 2nd, 2022. So that's a very, very special day. Here we are in a 2-year, and today is very special. So usually these days have kind of a portal senses to them. So I think we're in good shape for our talk today.
Good space.
And Jackie, I'm very honored also that you decided to come and talk with us. We are very interested in disclosure with one story at a time. And it's always wonderful for me to meet another person with a story. I have a story, and that's how it all started for me. But many of us have spent years and years thinking that we're the only one, not really wanting to talk about our experiences. And now it's wide open for us. And I think that we'll be seeing a lot of people coming forward with their things. So I wanted to thank you for your courage to come out and speak. And I wanted to get started with a little bit of background. You mentioned in your write-up that you started from childhood, but I wanted you to expand on your childhood a little bit, maybe talk about the kind of work your mom and dad did and the situation that you had as a child. So that would be my question.
Oh, okay.
Good start.
Well, some of it's pretty personal, but yeah, I'm willing to say something.
You don't have to do personal stuff. No, just general.
Okay. Yeah, just general. I was born in England just before the end of the World War II. So bombs were still falling at the time, and we were hid in cupboards in case a bomb hit the house. And we lived in row houses, so all the bombs hit across the street and behind us and next door. But we were lucky enough to survive. We survived that, and that was my sister and I. My mother had 3 of us during that time. But my twin sister was stillborn. And my third sister, who was not identical twin, she was a twin, she was born. So there was just 2 of us born in that time. This may sound kind of convoluted, but I haven't thought about this in the past. My mother didn't have much education because of the war. She was an older teen, and she joined the WACs. My father didn't have much education, but he joined the war as well. And that's where they met. He was Canadian, she was British. So we had quite a different lifestyle. My mother was really reluctant to move here at first until after the war. Then she brought us here to be with my father. But my father was an alcoholic. And we lived in a very tiny house, a wartime house. It was just a small bungalow. There was 2 bedrooms. And to start in on this, I remember my sister and I in our teens, being preteens, actually it was around 11 or 12 years old, being very afraid to go to bed at night. We just didn't want to go to bed at night because we felt like there was something in the room, and we'd check under the bed and we'd block the windows. And we shared a bed at that time, both my sister and I. And we would frighten each other too by saying different things. Oh, there's something in here. There's something coming in here. We have to close the door, make sure the windows are closed, and everything like that. So we began being very afraid when we were in that particular small house, and we thought of ghosts and stuff like that. And that was in the 50s. I think it was the late 50s by then. But one particular night, I remember, this time we both had separate beds, but we both had single beds, or kind of pushed together because the room, like I said, was pretty small. And I always laid on the edge, and there was a small window above me, And I remember laying there and just about asleep. And I remember the bed moving. And my sister remembers these things happening as well. The bed moving and not knowing if I was dreaming, if I was awake, what was happening. But this particular time, I remember the bed moving, and then I remember seeing something in a vision because I had my eyes closed. A woman behind me with black hair and a white streak in her hair. And she was kneeling behind me as I was laying on my side. And it was like she was trying to put a needle or something in my upper back. I wasn't sure what that was, but that's kind of the vision that I got as I was laying there. And it was really, really scary. I also knew that I couldn't move. I tried screaming. I tried everything I could to move, to scream, to yell for my parents, and I couldn't. And I don't remember what happened next. I don't remember being on a ship, but I know now, I know that somehow I was taken on a ship, and that memory could have been from them coming onto the bed and taking me or something. I don't know what they were doing to me. But I remember still trying to move, and I remember trying to move so much, and I found myself on the floor, and that's where I woke up, was on the floor. And I thought I had been paralyzed, and I just woke up on the floor. And it was still really scary. I don't know how long this lasted. And so I went into the kitchen because I thought, you know, it was the middle of the night. So I thought, well, I'll go in the kitchen and have a cup of tea. Even at 12, you know, I drank tea and stuff. So I went into the kitchen and the light was on, and we had a very small kitchen, and my father was sitting at the table in his chair. So I turned on the kettle and started making the tea, and I said, oh, well, you couldn't sleep either? And he said, no, I couldn't sleep. And I said, well, I had a really bad dream, really awful dream. And he said, yeah, well, I sort of had a bad dream too. And so his face looked really ashen, almost white. Like he just didn't really want to talk about it. He just sat there drinking his tea, like he didn't know what happened. And I didn't know what happened either. So I drank my tea with him, and neither one of us said anything. And finally I went to bed, and by that time there was light. It was getting light outside. That was the first time I remember. The second time is kind of enmeshed with the third time. What I remember about this next time, I'm not sure if it was the second or third, is that I was laying in bed, and again, I looked up the window and I saw this red orange light at the window. And all of a sudden I became paralyzed again. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't yell, I couldn't scream, I couldn't do anything. Again, it was very, very terrifying. And I felt again the bed moving, and I felt like somebody was putting covers over my face, and I kept wanting to put down the covers, you know, get them away from me. And the bed was moving, something was moving. And then I saw around my bed was about maybe 7 to 10 of my friends were standing around my bed. But they had kind of grayish faces. They looked like my friends, but they had kind of grayish faces, and they were short, maybe 3 or 4 feet. I couldn't see them from the waist down because of the bed. And actually, I think I had my eyes closed, but I sort of saw them, 3 or 4 or 7 to 10 of these little gray creatures that looked like my friends. And I couldn't understand that. I was completely perplexed in those days because I knew nothing about UFOs, nothing about aliens, nothing about EETs, nothing about abductions, but it scared the hell out of me. And I remember later on, I came back, I don't know how, but I woke up and I was really afraid, and I looked around and nothing was there. And I quickly got up and turned on the light, and nothing was there. And I remember thinking, I don't know what happened, but it was so very scary. I was petrified. And I remember thinking to myself, if this ever happens again, I'm going to go crazy. I'm really
Mm,
going to go crazy. And I kept saying that to myself, and I might have said it out loud. I'm going to go crazy if this happens again. I don't want this to happen again.
mm.
And it didn't happen again like that. But I know it was 3 times, 3 particular nights. Maybe it was every Tuesday night at a certain time. And then when that last experience happened, when I said never again, I don't remember it happening again, but I felt them. I felt them around me, and I've always felt them around me. But there was another time as well.
Jackie, can I just ask you a
Sure,
question? When this,
sure.
when the friends were standing around you, around what age group were you then? You were
That's all started when I was about 11 or 12.
11
Those are
or
the 3 experiences when I was that age. Three
yeah.
weeks in a row, once a night, for 3 weeks.
Well, I wanted to say something about you said you didn't want it to happen again. So you declared your sovereignty, and usually they can't go against that. So if you say I don't want this anymore, you can't do this anymore, they usually don't. So
Well, it did
uh,
happen again.
pardon?
It did happen again, but it was much
Yes,
later. And
yes.
I realized much more what was happening at that time. Um, so I'll go into my mother. It was a few years later. I had many different experiences, many different spontaneous metaphysical spiritual experiences. And it was when I was about 17 or 18. I was talking to my mother about this, and I had read an article about UFOs. I think it was in the paper about UFOs, abducting people and stuff like this. It was just a small article, and it really gave me this sense inside myself, like it was somebody kicked me in the stomach. So I talked to my mother about this, and I said, oh my gosh, this reminds me of what happened to me many years ago. And I'd never talked to her about this, never talked to anybody about it. And she said, oh, I know, that happened to me too. And so she started explaining her experience. And she said when my sister and I were very little, when we were little girls, I guess, she had an experience where she felt like she was abducted. She saw the red light again at the window, and she noticed herself on this, like a gurney, in this room, big room. And it had like a balcony or something above it, where it was like a theater where they watch operations take place, and it had this balcony above it. And she remembers tall grays beside her, and they were speaking to her and telling her it's okay, everything's going to be okay. And then she looked towards her feet, and she kept saying, I don't know what it was, but it was like it had a huge, like a horse face. And by then I had read some information. I said, I think that was a mantoid being with that huge face. And then she looked upstairs, and she saw upstairs there was like 5 or 6 men in black overlooking what was taking place with her. And she says she didn't remember what was taking place with her, but she knew that there was something going on. And she felt like it was something sexual, but she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure, but they were doing something to her. Um, so this is her memory. And then she had another memory later, and she was older at this time. This is when I was being abducted as well. My sister and I knew my sister was too, because she was just as afraid as I was, but she wouldn't talk about it. And she remembers going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and she was sitting there on the bathroom on the can, and she saw a red light at the bathroom window. And she said, I don't remember anything after that, but I was still sitting there, and it was getting light outside. So she knew that she was probably abducted, and then brought back to the same place. So those were her experiences. And then there was my father, of course, had been abducted. So I found this book called Communion when I got a little bit older. I think I was in my 20s then, and I was really trying to search for things because I had had so many spiritual experiences as well. I'm just talking about the ET experiences at this point. And I looked at Communion and I saw the face there, and I just, oh my God, I felt again like I had been kicked in the stomach. And I read the whole thing, and I think it took me maybe a day, maybe 2 days. I don't remember, but it was very short. I just kept reading it and reading it. I was just enthralled by it. And then that brought more of the memories back to me at that time. And I knew my mother and my father, my sister and myself had experienced these things. And I knew that. It was just really obvious from the way they reacted. And then I had 2 children, 2 small girls. And I moved to South Dakota. I married a guy from South Dakota who was a country western musician, and we were on the road down in the States. And we managed to stay in South Dakota for a while. And I was seeing spirits. Kept seeing these spirits. They would come and visit me all the time. And I didn't know what was going on there either. And I would just say hi to them and they'd talk to me and so on and so forth. But at that time, I had been divorced after a few years. We divorced and I had my kids. And I had met somebody who was also a single parent and going to school. I had started school down there after my divorce. And she was really interesting. And so we became really, really good friends. She had 2 young daughters, the same as I did. And so we stayed in touch with each other. We became best friends. And then many years later, I came back to Canada. And we had kept in contact through phone conversations and so on and so forth. And she had come to a point in her life. She had run the Humane Society down there in a house outside in the country. And she was renting. And after many years, she had lost everything. And her 2 girls had grown up by then, and they were teenagers, and they were going through their own things, and they had left home. And she became suicidal because she didn't know where she was going to live. She lost her dogs. She lost everything. And when she became suicidal, she wrote me and she said, oh, this has been happening and I'm in a really bad spot. And so at that time, I was working with social services, and I had been taking some transpersonal hypnotherapy courses. And I said, gee, come up here and I'll see if I can help you. And so I got her up, and she spent a couple of weeks with me. And the first time I started working with her, all of a sudden, she started channeling. And she started channeling this entity. I don't know who he was, but it didn't last long because I was flabbergasted. My jaw dropped. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was getting all this information. He was talking about all this information. And I finally said, okay, now Tish will come back. And then she came back, and we both sat on the front step, and both of us smoked at the time, and we're just smoking like crazy, saying, oh, what the hell just happened? We couldn't believe what just happened. And then I worked with her again after that, and I thought I was taking her to a past life, and because I wanted to find out why she was going through all this. Well, her guides came in, different guides, and the one that's been with her all her life, his name was Anthony. And he came in and he said a whole bunch of things, and I don't have it right in front of me. But at first I had asked her, well, I thought she was going into a past life. And I said, well, look down and see what you have on your feet. And there was this long pause, and she looked down and she looked at her feet and she said, I have 3 toes. And again, my jaw dropped. And I said, oh, and she said, I'm a different species. And Anthony came in later and explained that there are different species. I have that actually here. And I can tell you some of what she said.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, that's another incident. Okay. Oh, I wanted to tell you about my Neanderthal experience. And that was when I was in Nanaimo. I'll just quickly talk about that too, knowing that all of us, there is not one person here that hasn't had their DNA changed in some way at some time, in the past. I went to a hypnotherapist in Nanaimo. And at that time, I was having a lot of spinal problems. And I was working with a lady in Nanaimo on the island. That's when I lived there. And I was doing hypnotherapy with her and some energy healing. I've done everything. And she said to me later, well, I'll get you a hypnotherapist and this will be a gift to you for everything that you've done. And I said, oh, great. Thank you very much. So I went to see this hypnotherapist. And we went into this hypnosis. Unfortunately, I don't have the recording with me, but I remember it. I remember suddenly coming to, and even though she was doing a past life or in between life, I don't remember, but I remember being in a cave. And I remember being like I don't know if it was a Cro-Magnon or a Neanderthal. I think it was Neanderthal. And I remember having a wife there, or, whatever they considered it then. There was a female there, and I had a small baby, an infant was laying there. And at the front of this cave, there was a big rock, and I was hiding behind this rock, and I was peering out from around the rock. And she said, are you afraid of something? And I said, no, but I saw 2 very long, thin, lighted beings, what I would call lighted beings. And they were walking along the other side of the valley. And I was just so interested in them. And I was peering at them, and I wasn't afraid of them, but I was curious. I remember seeing them, very, very curious about them, because I knew that somehow they had changed the DNA in myself at that time, and in my child. I knew my child was going to be different, my infant son. And this is what I said. Another part of me, another aspect of me knew what was going on and understood that my child was going to be quite different from what I was. But they don't change sporadically, like quickly. It happens over time. So I knew that we were kind of setting another generation in that way. And these beings that I can remember, I couldn't see their facial features, but I remember them very tall, long white hair, long robes, white robes. That's the only way I can describe it. And of light, they were light. It was like shining light through them, around them. They were beautiful. And I never knew what they were at the time when I had this experience. But I was very curious about them. And I want to tell you about my youngest daughter too. Okay, I'm going back and forth here, but this is just ET experiences that I'm getting at during this time. My youngest daughter, she was about 11 or 12 as well. And she experienced in the,
Sorry, would you mind telling us around what year we're at right now? And what year you did the hypnotherapy? I was interested.
okay, the year of the hypnotherapy was, I think it was around 2008 or 9.
Thank you.
Maybe,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I think it was around then. I can get back to you on that, but that's what comes to me now. And
Jack, I did want to comment while you're on your Neanderthal
Sure.
experience. Like Richard Dolan writes in this book, Alien Agendas, he talks about possible DNA upgrade approximately 45,000 years ago with the Neanderthals. They got this DLL encephalin gene, and
Mhm.
geneticists insist they had to have gotten from the outside or some outside source. So it could have been alien. That's the theory. So I wonder if this is a memory of something, actually an experience like that. And also it's gradual, like it's like probably
Yes,
now it's gradual
yes,
and it's happening.
yes.
So that's a very powerful, meaningful memory. Do you think it might relate to that? Like an upgrade at that time?
Yes, absolutely. And from what I've gotten since then is that the Palladians have genetically altered our DNA. So I think that's what they were. What I think they were is Palladians. I'm not positive because I never read any of the ET books or any of those things. I never really looked into it, but I've had experiences with it. So yeah, definitely, Brian. I agree with that. My girlfriend actually speaks to that.
I wanted to say something also here, Jackie, is that the beings that I saw the first time I was abducted, like physically abducted onto a ship, they were the same beings that you're talking about. And that was one of the things that really, really connected with me with your story, is that they are the same beings as myself. In my case, they told me that they were my ancestors and that I had lived on Mars. So I don't know if that helps. I've done some regressions. I did a regression with Mary Rodwell, and when the children were dropped off, which in my story, the children are evacuated from Mars. When they're dropped off in a cave, and it's the Neanderthal time. So the stories are just so much corroboration there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I agree totally
I don't
with
feel
you.
crazy anymore.
No, well, you knew that you weren't crazy anyway. I mean, after these experiences, when we have time to integrate them, so to speak, through introspection and thinking and feeling and having other experiences, and everything starts coming together. We start integrating these experiences, and they're all basically the same in a lot of ways. We can connect through the similarity of them. And I know it's happened to many, many, many people, and there's not one of us I know on the face of the earth that isn't here for the purpose of expanding ourselves, because they will be joining us eventually. And we have to learn to communicate with them. We have to learn to be with them. We have to raise our consciousness. And that's the whole purpose of all of this, is raising our consciousness in order to become affiliated with them and expanding with them. We can't at this point, but we are getting there, and we will be with them. We will be.
And also because we've been, if not deceived, then I would say that perhaps it has been forgotten, the history, and they are giving us some background on humanity. Where we come from, how we were changed. And that's wonderful, because we don't have that information from regular sources.
No, we can only depend upon other people's experiences and what they've written. And sometimes we have our own experiences, but sometimes they can be so sporadic and so disjointed that we really don't understand what's happening, because it's been taking place for eons, actually eons, not just in the 50s or the 40s or the 30s. You know, it's been taking place for eons, but nobody has ever spoken of it because the consciousness was so low at those times. It was considered just a bit of an experience, but they really started progressing in their abduction experiences, but they are no longer doing that. And before we get into that part, I want to just say a little bit about my youngest daughter. My oldest daughter doesn't remember, but I know she was also abducted. I don't like the word abducted. I would prefer to use another word. I don't know if you guys have another word, but
Yeah, like some contact. Yeah, I think it's a bad
Contact.
word from David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, you know. Like, I think
right.
we'd be better off.
Yeah.
Like in this book, they criticize that very term. So
Okay.
there might be some cooperative relationship or agreement, like permission
Right.
sought, permission granted in the past.
I agree with you, Brian. And I don't like to use the word either. But that was the only word I could come up with at the
What about
time.
transported? Would transported be a good word?
Transported, yes, that would do as well, you know.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's, it's against your will. It's more like, oh, you were transported into another.
Well, I felt like it was against my will at the time,
Yeah.
but and I felt like, you know, everything that was being done to me was against my will.
Yeah.
And I just want to talk about my daughter's experience, and I talked about my mother's, but my youngest daughter also had an experience when she was about 11 or 12. She experienced being in contact. She had gone to bed that night and she was sleeping, but remember sitting in a room with other people, and it was like a horseshoe, not so much a couch or chairs or separate chairs, but it was like it came out of the side of this ship or whatever it was. But she remembers sitting there with other people, and she doesn't remember talking to them or communicating with them, but the people were other ages as well. They weren't just a certain age. And each one of them was transported by a gurney, somewhat like a gurney, into another room when they were transported. And she remembers the seat was coming out of the room, and no one talked to each other, but she remembers grays coming in there. She does remember the tall grays being there, and they took one person at a time, what looked like on a gurney. And she remembers a large light above her, like a surgery light. And she remembers them doing something to her, but she doesn't remember what they were doing. But she does remember them, one of them sort of like holding her hand and saying, it's okay, it'll be okay. And she remembers being calmed and soothed by the tall grays being there, especially this one that was standing beside her. But she does remember telepathically talking to them in these ways. And she doesn't remember a lot more. My mother is the one that remembered the most of different beings, and the men in black, as well as the mantoids and the grays. And actually I had, that was probably when she was 11 or 12. That would be, oh gosh, when was that? I was probably in my 40s.
Oh, what year was she born?
She was born in 1970.
So it's
okay. So
1981.
84.
81.
Yeah, 81. Yeah, 81, 82, somewhere around there.
You should keep going chronologically with your experiences and family experience. This is good. We should get this recorded.
Well, it's hard to be in chronological order because I've
No, it
had,
doesn't have to be chronological. Sorry, it doesn't have to be chronological. Memory isn't like that, I know.
well, I've had other experiences as well. I'll explain one other experience I had. This was again in Nanaimo, and this is just before we left Nanaimo, so it must have been about 9 years ago. This is 2022, 2012, I think, somewhere around in 2012. But it was before we left Nanaimo. I'll get to it. I don't remember. Oh, it was about 2015. Pardon me. I have it written down here. So it was about 7 years ago. I had a day where there was 3 particular incidences that happened to me that day. One of them, I had been working at a New Age store in Nanaimo, not working at it, but I had been going there and having a spirit releasement. I was doing spirit releasement at the time. Like I said, I was into all kinds of different things. And so I had a small group there and we were releasing spirits and I was leading them through this. I remember feeling really dizzy and profound because we had gotten the spirits of a center there that is not going anymore. It was for disabled, for mentally ill people. In those days, there was a huge center just outside of Nanaimo, and we wanted to release the spirits. And boy, that was quite a fascinating experience because they did come in and we did release some of them, but I was really, I felt really dizzy, like I was going to faint. So there was some other entities there as well. And this one lady that was with us, she had written a book and she had it for sale at that particular store. She had gotten into her awareness through spirituality and through her drumming because she had found out that she had Native heritage. And so she got into this and got into their spirituality, and she used one of those drums that you hold and you bang on, the Aboriginal Native heritage. And so I talked to her afterwards and she said, well, why don't you come over to my place and I'll just do some work on you? And I said, oh, that sounds like an awesome idea. So I went over to her place that afternoon and we had a talk, kind of a talk therapy session where she asked questions and so on and so forth. And then she had me go to another room and sit on a chair, just an ordinary chair. And I was sitting there and she came behind me and she had her drum behind me and she lifted up over my head and she started beating on it really fast, really fast. And I remember it was like electricity going whoomph through my whole body. I had this electrical experience and I couldn't believe what I was feeling. Everything, every hair stood up and with all this electricity pouring through me. And, I thought, oh, wow, this is an amazing experience. I never imagined that happening to me. So I went home that afternoon and then I decided to go for a walk around Nanaimo Park beside the ocean. There's a big park there and you can walk up to the cliffs. And I used to love walking up to the cliffs and meditating on the cliffside with the ocean coming in down below me. So I did this and I meditated for a short time. And then I decided just to kind of ground myself. I needed some grounding. So then I decided to go down the other side of the cliff. There was a small pathway going down. And along the pathway, as well as around the cliff, there were what I didn't know at the time were called Gary oak trees. And they're mostly snarled and shorter and kind of gnarled and really strong trees. So as I was going down this cliff, I grabbed onto a branch of a Gary oak to give myself footing. And when I grabbed onto it, all of a sudden I couldn't let go of it. It was speaking to me and it gave me the sense that I was like the Gary oak. I had been through so many challenges in my life and I was getting stronger through these challenges. And it was it was like a vision and an experience and talking to me at the same time. I don't know how long it lasted, but I held on there for a while as my whole life kind of went through me and all my challenging experiences came through me. But I realized that it was trying to tell me that I am strong. I am getting stronger and stronger. And they really appreciated this for me. You know, they wanted to tell me this through the Gary Oak. So I did finally go home from this. And that night, I decided that I needed to have a bath, a hot bath, just to relax in the bathtub. And I thought, you know, maybe with this bath, I need to bring out some issues that I've had, you know, that have been blocking me in some ways. So I laid in the bathtub, and I remember I knew about speaking or chanting and being vocal with your experiences, with challenges and pain and all of that. So I just started with a little bit of just being vocal, and then it became louder and louder, and I started sobbing and sobbing and just almost screaming in pain. The pain that had come to the surface and was being emitted through me was powerful. It was so powerful. I can't explain how powerful that was to have those experiences. You know, it was like everything that had come to the surface was being released. And I did finally calm down, but I was really, really happy that there was nobody home, because at the time I lived with my youngest daughter and her husband. And I was really happy that nobody could hear me, because they would have thought that I was being murdered. So finally I did calm down, and I went to bed. It had been, and by the way, it had been many years since I actually had a UFO experience, but I went to bed, and this is 2015, and I laid on my side because I was getting ready to go to sleep. And all of a sudden I saw this red, orangey red light at the window. And I remember thinking, just out of the blue, oh, they're here. And all of a sudden I was paralyzed. And I knew I was paralyzed. I couldn't open my eyes, but I wasn't paralyzed from my hips down. And I knew they were there because I could feel them come in the back of me. I could feel them there, and I started kicking and, get out of here. I don't want you here anymore. I don't want you here. I said that years ago. I don't want you. You know? But that was my ego part. We have aspects of ourselves that are consciously aware of this thing happening, but our ego parts of ourselves say, no way, I can't take this anymore, because our ego feels like it's going to be annihilated when it's really not. So I was just throwing my feet back and forth, but I couldn't move anything else. And I heard this click, click, click. And that happened maybe 5 or 6 times. And I realized then that they were scanning me. They weren't abducting me. And because I had those 3 particular experiences, I really believe they were trying to find out what was happening to me, how I had changed, whether my pineal gland had changed, what was changing in my DNA, because I know the DNA has been changing all through life. And, you know, with these shifts in consciousness, our DNA changes. So they were scanning and getting, I guess, what you call writings as to how it was being changed, my pineal or my DNA or whatever was happening. And all of a sudden, I was fine again. So I laid there and thought about that. And I thought, well, why did this happen at such a late age? Because I'd had it before. But then I remembered many times throughout my life that they were there. I could feel them there, but I wasn't afraid of them. And my girlfriend had said years before that they were scanning, that they were just scanning us now. And this brings me into what my girlfriend said about them. And I do want to cover that because I think it really, really does make a lot of difference in how we're experiencing things. So, excuse me, I have to get my notes.
Yeah, no problem. We can always edit it out of the video. No hurry, right?
Okay.
This isn't live.
Yeah.
Take your
So
time.
this channeling happened in May 2002, and it's an old one, but I remembered it. So I just made a few transcripts out of I have boxes of recordings of our sessions, but I just made a few transcripts because it took me so long to do it. I still only type with just a few fingers. So this is when she was channeling and I was speaking to my guide, Joseph. And we had many, many conversations. And this one was on the abductions and the aliens. And I had said, as to the abductions, I asked my guide, Joseph, to speak to me about the aliens and abductions because he entered Tish at that time. And he said, as to the abductions, the reason I have chosen to speak to you directly is because I have been with you for a very, very long time and have observed these abductions or contacts with you. And I said, well, are they still doing this? It seems I still feel them around me every once in a while, but I'm not sure. And that was, like I said, in 2002. And Joseph said, they do what you call scans, or what they call scans on you even still. So they've never stopped that because of the changes they created in your internal organs. And I never thought they changed internal organs, but apparently they do. They withdrew any further assistance and only want to observe the human body as it matures and ages with the changes that they made. They scan the progress, but are no longer intruding or making any changes or adjustments. They want to see how naturally your body handles the original changes. And they had said before, and I just remembered this one, is that they also took plant species, animal species. They also did changes to them and looked at them, experimented on them to see how we were working the earth, to see how the earth was changing, because we're all in synchronicity with the earth. When the earth changes, we change along with it. When we change, the earth changes. So I asked, what kind of aliens are these? And by then I thought they were the Greys because I knew I seen them when my daughter saw them and so on and so forth. So Joseph said, they are the long, tall Greys that come to you. There are a variety of different, what you would call alien sources. We would call them species that have been allowed to observe the progress of the evolution of the human on the earth plane. They have done some experimentation. They have done some implantation. They have done some removals. They have done a variety of things. We have stayed back and allowed this to progress because there's the need for union with this human race as it progresses to the point that it can accept different life forms. A union, an understanding, a finding common ground is necessary for future generations. And I said, us or them? And Joseph said, for all, for them as well as us. So I said, well, it's not necessarily bad then. And Joseph said, none of the experiments, as you would say, have ever meant to be harmful. They're trying out the combinations. There are restrictions of other species that humans don't have, and there are restrictions of humans that other species don't have. They would like to combine genetics, and the creator, whatever your belief, I don't know, but this is what they said. The creator has allowed this as long as the natural evolution of the species into each other, as long as there isn't any basic interference of one species into the other. There may be adjustments that are made from one species to the other without affecting the evolution of both. The creator has allowed this. If there was going to be a major effect on the evolution of either species, it would not be allowed. And that is why the abductions occurred. This is the only purpose. Otherwise, they would simply take and change humanoids and change other species. But that's not allowed. They must see the progress of minor changes and how it affects the species in the natural environment. There has never been any harm intended. And I said, well, there's been a lot of fear associated with it, especially for the children. And he said, but the fear is created by the not knowing, because we weren't up in consciousness yet. So they've just adjusted my body. Yes, there have been changes made to your body, your mother's, to your father's, to your sister's, different changes to each. They are keeping track of the genetic changes and observing the changes as those lives progress. When you see them, when you feel them around you, it's for the scanning purposes. And I asked if my grandson had also been abducted, because I remember them being afraid when they were young. And they wanted, and my youngest one, Cody, when he was like 3 or 4, he would say, close the window. I want the window closed when he went to bed. Close the window. Make sure the doors are locked. They might come in, you know. I remember that clearly. My daughter doesn't. My daughter who had the 2 grandsons.
How old was he at that time?
He was about 4 or 5,
Wow.
3, 4, or 5, somewhere around that. He was pretty young. And he had a brother that was about a year younger. So the brother would have been 2 or 3. So around that time. And he said, no, this isn't his imagination. He is genetically related to you. He has your genes, the changed genes. There have been changes to both children. There have been changes to other children in the family as well. So it happened in other children in the family I wasn't aware of. The changes to your parents were different from the changes to you and your sister. The changes were different to your children than the changes to you, and the next generation, and the next generation. Some changes in some genetic patterns have weakened the species. Ew, I wasn't aware of that. Those changes have not been allowed to reverse, but have been carefully documented so as not to repeat. Changes are not meant to strengthen or to weaken. They are just meant to make adjustments in order for the species to understand, coexist, and communicate better. There's not a melding. One species will remain one and the other will remain the other. So I asked about my daughter, and he said, well, the changes were made in your generation will not be made to your grandsons. They learn once, so they don't need to repeat them. They do take random, well, I thought this sounds cold. They take random samples of different genetic structures around the world. but we do not continue to allow the same experiments over and over. And that's when, and I know he had said something about the plants and the animals and stuff too. So I know they were taking, they were doing experiments on them as well to see what they could find out. And I said, well, this seems strange being experimented on. Ooh. But I understood the purpose. And he said, it's not meant to be harmful. You're not losing your freedom of choice. And he said, our most magnificent thing that we are born with is our freedom of choice, and they would never take that away from us. It seems like we are, but we have made those contracts before we came to Earth. We have agreed to these purposes, and we have agreed to be abducted, or contact, or whatever it was that we agreed to be, would have this done to us. Without trying these things in the natural environment, the experiences would not have been allowed. They would have been too harsh, and the changes would have been irreversible or too extreme. So doing small, very small adjustments, and then watching the growth, the change, was the only way it could be done or allowed. It may never be as we had hoped. There have been reports that some of the experiments have been very productive, and some reports have not been very useful at all, and that was expected. And then I said, so we basically for evolution then, in a way, to help both species evolve? And he said, the population of the Earth is but one life form, and all life forms eventually must be able to communicate and exist, coexist. So far, the Earth has been isolated from the need, but the conditions on the planet are progressively increasing to where that is not going to be possible for the survival of the species. And as we know, the Earth is in really bad shape right now. If one technique of natural physical adjustments is not possible, then mechanical adjustments will have to be suggested into the minds of inventors. And right now they've come up with hip replacements, heart replacements, different mechanical means, like our doctors, our physicians, our scientists are figuring out how to do this, how to do that, how to change this, how to change that, whether it's mRNA, whether it's DNA, regardless of what it is, those are giving into the minds of those who are producing these effects, so that we can be changed with them. They prefer to see if they could encourage natural evolution rather than the use of mechanical. The guides have been aware. The experience has not been ongoing without permission or knowledge of the creator, he says again. The biggest source of fear is that the Earth has been isolated. I think I already read that. Okay. He says something else here that I found really interesting. So anyway, that's why Joseph came into contact with me. He says, our true form, he says, the one reason I've come to be with you, Jackie, is I have been Joseph taking this kind of physical form that this one, Tish, understands when she sees my image. So what we call the guides and those who speak through us are not necessarily humanoid. They just come through us, or they come to us with an image of what we expect to see. I've also been an emissary in other galaxies with other life beings. When I am seen in other galaxies by other life forces there, I do not have the form that you are experiencing on your earth plane with your concepts. That is why our forms are really created for you, because we are, as you will be and were before, energy. The concept of a form is what we provide for your comfort only. Yeah, and I said, yeah, I understand that everything is energy. And he said, we don't require any form whatsoever, but that would be confusing and somewhat disarming when communication is allowed. It is easier if we create a form which you are comfortable with, and this one, Tish, what he was talking about, is comfortable with. If we are going to merge with her and enjoy our ability to communicate directly, we must present a form which does not create fear for anyone. Okay, then I asked if I had been in another galaxy or universe. And he said, our true form is pure energy. If we were on another galaxy with other species, we would represent ourselves in another form, which is comfortable for them. And her concept is that it is pure energy and has no form, but that is not a concept ready for many earth plane beings. So we create that form that they can be comfortable with. And this is another one for another species. Okay, and he comes into her again, and he's showing what I look like on another planet, or what he has looked like on another planet. And he's actually showing me several different species. So when they come through you, they come, we've all been different species and other planets, by the way. We all have experienced that because we've been around for eons, but we have decided to come into Earth in these physical forms and these physical bodies as earth plane beings. And that's why so many of us can remember different things and have different experiences, because we have, but we've been isolated and we've went into this dark arena, and we are coming out of that as the light is coming in more spectacular. Every day the light is coming in brighter and brighter, and all the garbage from underneath that we have seen, all the darkness is rising to the top. And that's what we're seeing and have seen for the last number of years. So he shows different forms. He shows Tish different forms and different planets. She is an alien. She's definitely, and she knows that she is, and she's very different from most people. Partly to see that because
you mean
of
Tish, you're saying Tish knows
yes,
she's an alien? So
yes,
she's obviously a human being now, but
she's
she
well,
was
she's
an
like
alien?
she was many aliens.
But do you
or
think, is she like
ET
literally a hybrid right now, or is she just a former alien, now a human being, like an alien took human form? You know?
Well, how they explained it to us at one point is that she's kind of an angelic being of higher vibration. She can heal. She automatically speaks to animals, and she's done this all of her life, and she didn't know that she could do this. She thought everybody could do it. She goes into a trance very easily. She could do this on her own, but her and I work together, so she expected me to work with her. But she does some very amazing things. So, but she needed to be brought back. And this is why she became suicidal at that time, because it brought her into a surrender. And she was just open. She just opened up, you know. So that's when I happened to have words with her. Okay. Okay, I wanted to get to something else here. Okay, and I asked them if I had been to form in other galaxies, other dimensions, and he said yes. And they showed her a bird creature with wings, like a dinosaur bird. And I said, could that be from when the earth first began? And they said, and Joseph said, no, it's on another plane, not on this earth. There are intelligent, sentient beings, these bird creatures, not huge as the dinosaurs on earth. We're searching to make a correlation from the memory banks that are available, because when they come in, they only have the memory banks, the brain, to make correlations with. So they search for those. It's difficult to explain to souls in earth bodies with conscious mind restrictions, and we are restricted consciously. So we will try to make comparisons to creatures on the earth for things on other levels of existence. And that's what they do. And that's actually how they show us themselves. Like, they won't show us something that's really, that our mind can't make any sense of. So they'll show us different beings. I'm sure that that's why the shorter grays showed faces of friends, of my friends, because they wanted to make me feel more at ease and put me at ease instead of, being so afraid. Okay, so it's difficult to explain to souls on Earth that have restrictions. So we'll try to make comparisons to creatures on Earth for other things of their level of existence. Okay. Okay, are they evolving at the same time that we are evolving? And he said, it's difficult to comprehend. The soul only evolves. So it's not our physicality, it's the soul, our spirit, our soul that evolves. The species appears to evolve, change, create, die out, make genetic changes. But the reality is that the soul is the only thing that is evolving. Each visitation in each universe and the experiences of each physical body creates learning, and that soul then evolves. And I asked, well, is there anything that you want to tell me about this and important for people to know? And he said, yes, the term you use, love. That is the form of all energy, all progression, all movement in all universes at all times. And my question was, I thought some of the beings in other universes could not feel emotions. Is that true or not true? Or is there a difference in feeling the emotion of being the emotion? And he said, what you experience in the physical form on the earth plane, which is what we call love, love for a mate, love for a child, love for a friend, love for the world, is constructed, formed, and adheres to the choice made by the earth plane physical body. The emotions that you feel in this earth body cannot be compared to what the sentient beings feel in other universes. There's no comparison. But that is not to say they don't feel or don't try to achieve as much as the physical earth plane body. They achieve their own physical requirements and desires in a form that is appropriate for their unique choice. Saying that other sentient beings have no emotions is absolutely incorrect. However, if you try to judge those emotions by what is required by the physical body on the earth, then you would say they have no emotions. The one universal feeling, if you want to call it a feeling or an emotion or a drive or an aspiration, is love. Love. All beings on all planets strive for the completion, the perfection, the development, and the assembling of things in their lives and people in their lives that create the energy of love. That is universal. And I asked, do all other universes and planets contain both male and female? I don't imagine they do, but you are saying in their social structure, they also create the energy of love. How do they do that? And then she said, you would have to look at each individual species, which we don't have time for. You would die long before we could get through each one. But the sentient beings that you were in a winged form have no need for the kind of things that give you pleasure on the earth plane. The things that make them happy, complete, are based on their physical and their environmental needs. And I asked, well, are they male or female? And they said, each species has its own unique process of physical reproduction. Some require male and female, some do not. Some have evolved to not need reproduction on a combination basis. All I can say is that their relationships as on the earth plane with others of their own species and with other species in their own space are major contributing factors in the seeking of the lessons and the love that they are gathering and learning. This is not a unique thing for the earth plane beings. Relationships provide that for a lot of species, even the species that do not pair one-on-one. The relationship that the whole species has is the ultimate importance. Do you understand that? Not all species take a physical form. Therefore, there is not a physical pairing, but a unity, like emergence. And that whole that emerges is the learning process of the species. The physical beings that are in individual bodies are a separate piece, a separate soul, spirit. But in the species that do not take individual form, the whole creates the relationship. So, okay, so that's what I have on that. And so we're coming to that. I know that so succinctly, so profoundly, so importantly, that we're all on earth for a specific reason, for a purpose. And I believe what they are trying to get from us is our reason for love, because love is an experience for everything. And the creator is love and light. It is the creator. It is the source of all, the all that is. So that's where I'm coming from, because that's where my thousands of different experiences came from, was the source of all, the creator. Love, everything.